Aloha, Dr. Lailufar Yasmin. I'd like to welcome you to Conversations on Women, Peace and Security with thought leaders, hosted by the Daniel K. Inouye Asia-Pacific Center for Security Studies. You are one of our very prominent and distinguished alumni from Bangladesh. You attended the Advanced Security Cooperation course with us last year, and you were with us very recently. I would like to ask you to please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background for the benefit of our listeners.
Thank you, Saira. It's very nice to meet you again after such a long period of time and under the circumstances where we can only say hi to each other through this medium. I have been teaching in the Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka for a little over 21 years now. I did my undergraduate and postgraduate from the same university in the same department. Then I did my second master's from Georgia State University in Women's Studies. That was under Fulbright scholarship, and that is when I started learning, institutionally about the issues that affect women, that often we take for granted, and that may have different types of undercurrents. And there, I did my thesis on how women are often, there's violence against women carried out against them in a manner that has a political implication, but that is often overlooked, for which my thesis during that academic year was given the Best Thesis Award, and I received a Research Draper Woodruff Fellowship for that, which was extremely prestigious, and my name is still there in my department as the recipient of that scholarship. After that, after coming back home, I went to, in about 2 years' time, I went to University of Ulster, Northern Ireland. This was under British Chevening Scholarship, where I did a 3-month course on peace and conflict issues in Northern Ireland, and to learn basically from going there that how to coexist even when a conflict may seem intractable. Then again, after about a year, I went to China. I was there in Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in Beijing. I did a 9-month fellowship on China's national interest after 9/11. So I was in a kind of dilemma: should I develop my expertise on China exclusively, or in peace and conflict studies, or in gender issues? But then I chose a completely different issue, because given the kind of restlessness that we saw all around the world after especially 9/11, the idea that who is a modern, who is an unmodern, was now being questioned in terms of religiosity, which I found very problematic and needed to be addressed at least from research and academic perspectives, so that it can be disseminated for better understanding on what is secularism. So I did my PhD on that issue in Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia, under International Postgraduate Research Scholarship, which is directly given by the Foreign Ministry of Australia. Actually, one other thing clashed, which I unfortunately, that I also received the Endeavour IPRS in the same academic year, which is given under country quota from Australian High Commission here. I wish I could pursue 2 PhDs side by side, but that's impossible. So I had to give one up and take the other up, but it has been a tremendous experience since then, because from my PhD, I could connect that how violent extremists, they take advantage of a certain situation, and what are the ways some interesting ideas that are politicized, for example Sharia, for example women's place in religion, or women's place in society. Often these are not religious, but these are cultural, and these are indigenized. This is not something that has direct connection with religion. So that has been a great contribution in my case. It has helped me to expand my knowledge on gender, religion, security at the same time. And then after coming back, I decided to sort of specialize on women, peace and security involving violent extremism at one hand, and on the other hand, I'm also working on Bangladesh foreign policy and Chinese interest in Bangladesh, and what do we get out of cooperating with the China in terms of regional political issues and bilateral political issues.
Wow, I'm blown away, Dr. Lailufar. You are very accomplished. It's amazing what you've done as a South Asian woman, as a Bangladeshi woman, and an academic. Your breadth of experience and the depth as well, it's very, very impressive. And you have studied so many different areas. So I would like to actually start by asking you something a little personal. Let's get away from academics for a little while. Tell me about your experience as a woman, as a leader, as someone who is helping to influence thinking and scholarship in South Asia and elsewhere. How do you lead?
Okay, it's very interesting, as you say, that in a country like Bangladesh, where we have had female leadership at the topmost tier of the country for quite for decades, in fact. So that has a very interesting, experience for not for our generation, but for the younger generation. For example, one of my friend's nephew, who is only 8 years old, he asks, can a man be a prime minister in Bangladesh? You see, because since his birth, he saw a woman prime minister. See what kind of impact this has on the younger generation. So this is, at one hand, has a tremendous sort of way that helps us, that we can assert that, look, there is a female prime minister who is so successfully running the country, and why it is difficult in different other tiers to accept a female authority, to accept a female leadership. So despite many developments, despite many other sort of issues, it's still very difficult often for women to assert here, because assertiveness often is misinterpreted as something that a woman is throwing a tantrum, is trying to get attention, etc., etc. So there are those aspects. But as a teacher, when I have, like in my undergraduate level, I have a class size over 100. Right now, my number of my first year students is 134. So you can well imagine when they see me and being a shorty, a small stature, and they're very surprised that how she can come and how she can be so bold. So this is something I have seen that they start paying attention, that this is not just a woman in the classroom trying to tell us something, but she makes us do things. So this is something I have noticed, that and giving equal attention to both male students and female students, and try to try to tell them, try to educate them that this degree is not the thing that you are going to get from this university, but you are also going to learn some skills, life skills, as to respect your classmate, be that a man or a woman. And when I teach first year, generally, students who are 18 years old, or sometimes just a little less than 18, they are also there, those students. So my first task in the first year level is to ask them, are you an adult? So in Bangladesh, the concept of adulthood is very interesting. You are officially adult if you are 18, but there are certain social acceptance that you must or social processes that you have to go through to become an adult. My personal experience, as you asked me, that my husband passed away 14 years back, and when I was married, I was considered as an adult. Now that I don't have a husband or children, because I have not gone through certain critical experiences in life, I'm often considered as a non-adult, someone who does not have a wide experience. But this is why I try to debunk whenever I meet with my whichever circle I'm meeting with, that is because I don't have that does not mean that I'm any less experienced, because I have to deal with your children when they are grown up. So I have all the right to talk about how to raise your children to my friends or my cousins and all of this. So it becomes really often troublesome to hear it from your colleagues or your friends or in different circles that you don't have a child, so you don't understand. So these ideas are still here very much prominent in Bangladesh in defining what ensures your adulthood. So my task is in the classroom and to tell them that being adult is to be able to take responsibility of your actions. So that is a very big step. And because my students, they go through the similar experiences from their parents, they might find me that I'm trying to sort of telling them something they do not hear in their by their parents, in their families. So this is one way I try to educate them, that you have to take responsibility, you have to grow with each other instead of thinking everyone else as your rival, as in opposition to you. So these are some of the ways that I try to deal with it, as well as in the wider area. Whenever I deal, this is something I try to do.
Lailufar, thank you for sharing your experience as a role model, how you establish your presence, your teaching presence, the kinds of lessons that you emphasize for your students, both male and female. I'm also very pleased to note that you mentioned that Bangladesh has had female prime ministers and still does, is led by one, and how inspirational it can be for the younger generations. In your view, especially because Bangladesh is so unique, do you think women lead differently than men? And how does it impact security-related outcomes? You've done a lot of studies on religiosity, on terrorism, on gender. What do you think? How have women positively impacted the landscape in Bangladesh? And it doesn't have to pertain to just the example of prime ministers, but also women like yourself.
Thank you. This is a very interesting question that we need to talk over and over again. I would say there are two sides of the question. At one hand, we often have we are talking about how women lead differently. On the other hand, there are other examples where women actually do not lead so differently than men. When we are talking about politics, still Machiavellian, this idea that your interest, that your national interest precedes all other interests. So that is one thing I would argue that works in the mind of both female, both women and men leaders. We have seen a number of occasions previously, Prime Minister Golda Meir and the famous the Margaret Thatcher, who was called as Iron Lady. So we have seen them that they have rather wanted to play by the rule of how to accomplish their national interests better. Then we have seen that later on there is this idea that women must have to be feminine as well as exert power. That is, a women leader must include the qualities of being strong as well as feminine. One example would be Julia Gillard, Australian Prime Minister, who posed for a photo that she was knitting something for Prince William's, child, when the news was flashed that they were having a child. So you see, so there is at one hand, there is this huge societal pressure, be that Australia, be that Bangladesh, be that in other areas, that women must, act feminine as well, so that they do not lose these qualities. But at the same time, when we're talking about putting more women in leadership position, that brings a qualitative change, as in that then we are not paying only lip service to women women's issues. It becomes an explicit, strength of a government. Foreign Affairs had a, article in March this year, which talked about this elaborately, that what happens when countries put women at the agenda. So Sweden is a big example of that. And then other LC Project of Canada. So they are the way they are trying to bring in women's leadership. So what difference does it make? There is a sort of a positive aspect of patriarchy as well as a negative aspect. We always tend to talk about how patriarchy tries to squash women's voices, but on the other hand, patriarchy helps us in another way. Women, that we generally tend to think women are peaceful. You see, this can be debunked in a lot of ways. We have seen during the Algerian War of Independence how women were used to carry grenades and put it in the nightclubs. How they helped the revolutionaries. We have seen the murder, assassination of Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi in India. Women are peaceful. You see, the whole discourse is, and then the Black Tigers by the LTTE. We have seen all of these discourses of posing women are peaceful. We have also seen in Bangladesh in one case when it is impossible for us to think, but when a female extremist was surrounded by police in one of the districts of Bangladesh, she held her baby as a threat, that I will blow the baby up if you don't let me go. You think that is impossible for a mother to do. You see, so women are not always peaceful. There is other side of it which is not highlighted very much. So this is one area which has helped violent extremists to pick women in their works. On the other hand, why this is helpful, that this discourse of women are peaceful, we have seen in the case of Algeria and some other African states, how the rebel groups trusted to surrender and put down their arms to women instead of men. So there are both interesting sides of this discourse, that yes, women do need differently in some cases, but also there is a risk of using this too many times. We need to contextualize this. We need to see the particular area where we are using this. So Mercedes did a fantastic job in the case of pointing out in Southeast Asia, particularly in Indonesia's context, that how women are recruited from chat groups, that women often feel they do not have agency, they do not have voices in the houses, despite perhaps being financially earning money. I fear very much the way the course of economy is going around, especially in Bangladesh. A lot of women who were secondary wage earners, who are quite capable, especially in the urban context, but they are losing their jobs. They are the first victims when a company cuts down. So what if these women are recruited in this manner? So this is one area I feel that in Bangladesh, when we are talking about violent extremism and when we are talking about how women live differently, that if someone tells you that I'm going to give you agency, to make your voices heard, this can be one of the areas that we need to look into. I cannot hear you. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. I was saying that this is really a very fascinating discussion, Lailufar. You already answered many of my questions, which I was thinking about. I was going to mention United Nations Security Council Resolution 2242, which was adopted in 2015 on the 15th anniversary of the Security Council Resolution on Women, Peace and Security, UNSCR 1325. This resolution 2242 talks about the relationship between gender inequality and the rise of extremism and violent extremism as a challenge to the WPS agenda. And so you talked a little bit about it, and I got the sense as you were speaking that you were trying to establish that perhaps there is some kind of a correlation between lack of women's agency and women's empowerment and their recruitment and engagement by militant and terrorist and extremist groups. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is what I was trying to say. And in fact, in a number of studies that are done, it is also sort of, it also came out that women who are victim of violent sort of violence in their houses, in their homes, by their intimate partners, they often want to take revenge, and they find that if they are approached by this kind of extremist groups, they find that this is the best way to express their their anger towards their partners or towards their families, which did not value their opinion, despite these women actually spending 24/7 for the service of their families, immediate families. So a number of studies actually, when our NAP, National Action Plan on WPS, was launched last year, so they are actually in one of the prevention pillar, this issue came up, that in Bangladesh, when NAP was being formulated, I was also invited to contribute before that, along with a number of other academics and other people who are working on this area. So we had this issue of defining that WPS talks about women's participation at all stages of prevention of the violence, peace building, peacemaking, all of these areas. But how do we define violence in Bangladesh's context, which is going to be 50 years old this year, and it has not seen war or skirmish in the sense that many of other countries have seen. So therefore we had difficulty that what do we mean by peace building in Bangladesh's context. So therefore then in Bangladesh's NAP, it was highlighted that peace may be established, peace may be a lack of structural acceptance of women's contribution or structural protection against women's survival, day-to-day life. That can be economic issue, that can be legal issue, that can be societal issue. So this was in our case, the NAP expanded and provided the prevention pillar, where it recognizes that there is a huge risk that how women can be recruited by violent extremists, and therefore we need to pay attention. And one of the very significant areas that I also argued, I also pointed out while I spoke with the Indo-Pacific navigators a couple of weeks back, is that we need to, I know it is very difficult, it is easy to say theoretically, but very difficult to implement empirically, is that household as the center. Because as I was saying, mothers are very powerful in a society like ours, and even in many other societies as well. So mothers are the first teachers, first educators for their children. But if mothers are, they have extremist ideas, so it's up to them if they're raising their children to be peaceful or to be violent. After Holy Artisan attack in 2016 here on 1st of July, in fact tomorrow is going to be 4 years of that heinous attack that took place here. A number of cases that the perpetrators, it was found out how they are disconnected with their families. Their families had no idea about their association, about their ideology. They were like fine young boys, regular, taking up regular activities. Suddenly they are somehow motivated for carrying out this kind of acts. So we find here that family bondage, which is an issue in the urban areas. Both parents are working, and therefore often parents find it that they are providing gadgets to their young children, and they cannot monitor what their children are doing with that gadget. So this connection is often seen to be lost between the parents and the kids. But then again, there's the other side, that because you need a second income in a very costly city like Dhaka, so you need your wife to work fully in other jobs. So how do you deal with this? So this dilemma is still is a context, is still being discussed in Bangladesh's context. But in the semi-urban areas, in rural areas, a number of initiatives has been taken by Bangladesh government along with USAID or other donors to educate the mothers, to reach the communities, to make them understand the power of words, power of language, and how one can demotivated, how or one can motivated to towards radical expressions. So yes, this is a huge issue here. So for WPS agenda, for us it is important so that violent extremism and these sort of issues we can actually address nationally. And also, while our NAP was being prepared, the team did not confine its discussions in the urban Dhaka city. Then it will be thinking of a minority community, because even when I'm speaking with you, I'm talking from a very urban perspective, very minority perspective, because you wouldn't find very many single women talking about all these issues. You understand that? So our when NEP was being formulated, they reached out, they went to semi-district areas, they spoke with religious leaders at the grassroots level and bring out their ideas. So often we think that rural areas people are very, very conservative, very rigid, but once you speak with them, once you start to reason with them, it may take time, but it is still possible to shift this patriarchal hold over, control over women.
Excellent. Lailufar, I loved listening to you, and I really appreciate the idea of building peace through preventative strategies, addressing structural barriers to women's inequality and empowering them, focusing on the household, building the capacities of mothers, recognizing the power that mothers have. Now, I'm appreciative of your time demands. I have one last question for you, Lailufar. You are so articulate and you are so confident. What advice would you give to South Asian women, to women in the Indo-Pacific and in Bangladesh? We need more women's perspectives, and you mentioned that your perspective is very unique. It is very urban. It's not often you hear a woman speak like you do. So what advice would you give women? How do you do that? How do you express yourself and be bold and be confident?
This is a very interesting question, because when I'll be talking once again, maybe it will be easier for women around, living in the Dhaka city or a little semi-district city to follow that. But I still found one thing very, very significant from my personal experience. The last public engagements that I had here in Dhaka in person was on celebrating March 8th, the International Women's Day, when some of us, we spoke with students about why we are celebrating Women's Day. And then we were asked to give them a general advice. It was students' ideas, and who you wanted to be if you could be one person. Of course, I said I wanted to be Cleopatra because the kind of political power that she had, because I still believe that women can make a substantial difference when they go to decision-making level, be that in local politics, be that in national politics, or be that in their, whichever capacity they can do. So this is one suggestion I would tell them, that to make their voices heard. Now, how do you make their voices heard? There are a number of, obstacles, but what I found in my case, you first start with a firm no, because women in South Asia, they're always taught to be submissive, to say yes. So you say firmly no, you stare people down. These are technical things that are written by decision makers, but I never read about them until, when I practiced and when I gradually found that this is effective. Then only after that I started reading the literature. So you stare people down. If you see in BBC, they did a interesting story a couple of days back, and the photo was of Serena Williams, that how during competition athletes stare each other down, so there is a power of your look, your simple, your stare. And also what I advised my students, that remember, when we are flying in a plane, the advice is that in case of a critical or a dangerous situation, first attend to yourself, your own mask. So I told them that what we have internalized, that it's a woman's duty to take care of others. The definition of love is that you are taking care of another man. So if someone loves you, he will be equally responsible for taking care of you. So why do we give it away? Why do we find that no, it's not a 40-60 or even 50-50 or 40-60 exchange, rather a 20-80 exchange? So I firmly told my students, think of yourself first, and there is nothing wrong developing yourself. There is nothing wrong feeling that I want to eat something, I want to do something, I want to buy something, and for myself. Because if I am not happy, if I'm not well enough, I cannot serve others better. I turn into a bitter person, and gradually other people around me suffer. So my example would be, think about what suggestions given in the airplane. Attend to yourself first and do not feel guilty about it. There's nothing that, because when women say, I know there are many other perspectives that I put my child first, but that is actually showing your child that you are a weak person, that you are sacrificing. So you need to be a bold mother in front of the child, so that and there are a number of studies saying that the women who work outside, their children are better raised because they have seen a confident, strong women, and they behave much better with their partners than the other children who did not see this asserting mother and empowered mother. And then I also sort of suggest people that empowerment does not mean only earning money. Empowerment also means almost equal, if not even more or a little less, sort of equal importance given in terms of decision making in the family. So I did this study that was back in late 90s, which was a huge study done both in Dhaka, in urban setting, also outside of Dhaka, where we have seen this tremendous findings that despite women earning money, they often found that where money would be invested, which school or college their children will go, these are important decisions. Men should do it. So I do not think this has changed very much yet. As I see around, we still think that by virtue of being biologically a man knows better. So this is something we need to confront with, stare them down, things will change.
Dr. Lailufar Yasmin, thank you so much for sharing your personal and professional insights. This was a very interesting and very valuable conversation on women, peace, and security. Thank you for joining us today.